Oh yeah, no worries.
Okay, so I think we're recording again. Okay, so this is part two of my interview with Morgana on all things feminism. So Morgana, so I was asking you, whether a lot of the feminism in the West, secular liberal feminism of the West, and that broad church of Western feminism, if they're guilty of basically liberal bigotry and this kind of white man's burden when it comes to this extreme allergy to Muslim women wearing the headscarf. And I'm talking
Yeah,
about
I
just
think
the
that's
headscarf. I'm
unquestionable.
not even talking about like the burkini, which exists in the Taliban and other conservative Islamic countries or societies, but just wearing the regular headscarf. If there's a lot of liberal bigotry that comes with what took place in Quebec and what's taking place in France, the efforts to completely you know uh, ban that altogether.
Yeah, so I would say yes, and I would include that not only to the hijab, but I would include that as well to the burqa, the niqab, all of it. I think absolutely there is this aversion. I'm not really sure how I would quantify like what liberal bigotry is. I guess it's bigotry in liberalism. That's a great way to describe it. And it's a liberal. We're talking about a liberal system and bigotry. It's there. 100%. And absolutely there is that whole white man's burden thing, or white woman's burden, I guess you could say. Yeah, see, that's not my brand of feminism. My brand of feminism isn't changing the white man's burden to the white woman's burden. My version of feminism is a little bit more open than that. Yeah, it's absolutely a thing. It's definitely just a new reincarnation of ways for people to show their displeasure at the other. And as far as I'm concerned, that's just it's just not helpful. And I think we see this a lot when we look at Quebec's Bill 21, because like it was even like proven that like that would impact Muslim women disproportionately, but it doesn't really seem to matter because we can make it more universal. And we can say, well, we're applying the same standards to everyone. Well, the old saying goes like, you can make it equally illegal for a rich man and a poor man to sleep under a bridge, but who's going to be the person that feels the brunt of that? So absolutely, this was absolutely targeted. And even if it wasn't targeted, the results are targeted. So 100%, I would agree that this is a bigotry that is manifesting. And I think that like as our values continue to change and grow, I think that like we're going to renew, I think, our love for religion. That sounds kind of strange coming from me as Miss Liberal, secular, whatever. But I think that like this resurgence of almost distaste, like extreme distaste for religiosity has covered a lot of just outright bigotry that happened, because this idea that like, oh, it's religious so it's bad, the laicite of the state, pardon me, my French is awful.
Yeah.
And so I think that like what's going to happen with that is that there's going to need to be some sort of reclamation of that, the way there's a reclamation with everything, right? Like, you tell a bunch of poor Black kids in LA that they ain't nothing, they're gonna and that they're going to like result to be nothing, they're gonna start like becoming amazing rap artists and singing about their struggle, and like that's what's gonna happen, right? Because people love reclaiming their identity when an identity is pushed onto them. So I think that like honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if we see like a lot of love and reclamation coming back, especially from Jewish women and Muslim women and Sikh women as well. I think we are going to see that because they're going to have to create a new space, right? One that is able to be right for them in the sense that it accepts them as they are, not necessarily trying to take these religious traditions from the past and push it on to who they are today. But I think that like people are going to have to at some point integrate that religiosity that we have, and quite frankly, the love that we have for religiosity, because alongside associated with that is all of these good things, right? We got community, we got beautiful art, we got culture, we have a way of knowing oneself. Like I say, it's another lens for looking at things, and it's really important to people's lives. So I hope that there's some sort of reclamation with that, where people that are empowered, like people of color and women and queer people that are empowered in their identity, can reclaim their religiosity within the context that they live today. Yeah, I would love to see that. I do think it will happen.
Yeah,
I'm waiting for it.
As an atheist, yeah, I'm not exactly thrilled about, about religions, but but even then, and this is a bit going off topic, but even when it comes to religion, I mean, yeah, the image that we get is that it's the root of all evil. When, okay, yes, there's a lot of there's a lot of bigotry that comes with with religion, but there's also been plenty of social movements influenced by religion that have produced a lot of good. If we look at the Quakers, the Unitarian churches, which is a very socially liberal, social justice oriented church, and yeah, and like I'm all for secularism, separation of church and state and so forth, but it's okay if a Muslim woman is wearing the headscarf, and as long as she is not imposing her religion on me, okay, fine with that. I mean, why can't we? And this goes back to our other topic of identity politics versus the class struggle. Like, why can't we just chew gum and walk at the same time? Why can't we say, okay, no to religious bigotry, but hey, Muslim woman is wearing her headscarf. Okay, I mean, we're okay with Sikh men wearing their turban over their heads.
So not in Canada.
Go on.
I don't know. Have you seen how Jagmeet Singh has been treated?
Yeah, I was just about to say, but you see, here's an interesting thing in and of itself. I mean, in the U.S., okay, like there's lots of like racism and there's lots of bigotry across the board in the United States, but in terms of like of the whole freedom to practice your religion. I mean, on paper, it's supposed to be as long as the religions don't bother you, the state isn't going to bother the religion. And I feel as if like there's not. I mean, even though there's a lots of Islamophobia in the States, there isn't this rampant. We need to ban the headscarf by all means, because if we allow women to wear the headscarf, the Taliban or the Islamic Republic of Iran and Hezbollah are going to invade us tomorrow. But they're seeing so.
Do you know why Quebec has that secularism ban now?
Well, I'm told it's because once upon a time, Quebec was under the, that Quebec was under the boots of the Catholic Church, and that's why Quebec has this this obsession with.
It's reactionary, yeah. It's reactionary to the fact that there was a lot of power in the Catholic Church for a very long time in Quebec, and now there's this little, the quiet revolution, and then, they're kind of over it now. So they're going a little bit far the other way.
Yeah, but we have the same problem in France. We have like the same problem in France, and again, it's like, why can't we just chew gum and walk at the same time? Why can't we just say like, okay, yeah, separation of church and state, but you know what? Muslim woman who's lived in this country for God knows how long, who is a French citizen, let her wear the headscarf. It's fine. Like, I'm not losing sleep over it. It's like, why does it have to just be like you don't fight extreme. You don't fight what you perceive to be extreme by being more extreme, because as you mentioned, that like that's just going to like, and at the same time, isn't that just going to make them want to be even more adamant about wearing the headscarf, or even going one step further, the burqa and whatnot?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that like when you, and like this is an idea that comes up in like Canadian multiculturalism as well, actually, and critiques of Canadian multiculturalism. A lot of the idea is like, hey, if you give people and like this is a big part of why Quebec has such like cultural capital in Canada as well. Sorry, this isn't the reason why, but this is kind of like integrated with that response. When they started, like, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, when he started doing like the multicultural thing, there was this idea that it's going to like erase historical fault lines because people are able to like express their culture and know and feel secure in their culture, and that it's not going to be erased. There's this idea that like, hey, we'll all just be chill then. The only problem is, as one of my law teachers say, Canadians really don't trust each other. We have this deep distrust of each other. We're very factionalist. We're very ununified, and that's been a historic reality for us since before Confederation.
Yeah, yet another Canadian mythhood which is being demolished on this show, that Canadians are all with each other. Now you're saying that Canadians, no, we really don't.
No, we're so factionalist. We are so factionalist because you know what? We are very regionalist as well. We're so big. We got all these. We have all of these provinces, which are. We probably have one of the most. Like I've been told that we have one of the most like pluralized federal states like ever. Like our provinces hold a lot of power, right? So like, this is the country we're in, and we need to keep that in mind, right? So yeah, there's this idea that like the historical fault lines will be erased, so it's going to be fine. But also what that does sometimes is it makes it so that like there's this language of tolerance where we're saying, okay, yes, we accept you, and so it'll be fine, and so you don't have to act more extreme now. But then what kind of happens with that is there's the expectation implicitly that because you are allowed to do your cultural thing, you'll just fall in line. You better not critique any of this. So that can be problematic as well, right? So there's just all of these different expectations and pressures, and like sequences, I guess I could say, sequences that happen very repetitively in like Canadian multiculturalism that relate extremely pertinently to that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, common sense pulls through in Quebec, and they repeal that very extreme ban on religious symbols.
I don't see it happening
because I just think it's counterproductive, and again, it's just liberal bigotry, and yeah, hell no to bigotry, right?
The legal constitutionality though is actually wild. Like it seems like they can totally just do it because they did the notwithstanding clause, and not that my legal opinion matters for anything, but I had to look into like what another reason that it could be struck down, and I guess like another reason that it could potentially be struck down, like let's say the charter didn't exist, would have been for it being outside of Quebec's jurisdiction, and there's this whole doctrine of implied rights stuff. I learned that recently. Again, not a legal expert, but I think that like that's really important to remember because it's so crazy that like the one thing that we have left is, in terms of like with the notwithstanding mechanism, given the fact that it was invoked, is like public outcry or voting them out. Like that's kind of wild to me, honestly, because we are a very textually constitutional country, but then you see these British elements come in when something like the notwithstanding clause is invoked, and it's very much parliamentary supremacy. So yeah, I don't know like what's going to happen with that. I really think we're stuck with it, and I hope I'm wrong, because I would love to see a development on that front, but I think we're stuck with Bill 21. Yeah.
So one last thing about that before I move to the next question is that so if that is the case, will it just have to be will it just have to be someone from the Liberal Party or another party who gets into power with a majority and says, okay, we're repealing this law?
That's not going to happen in Quebec anytime soon. It would have to be. Oh, geez. I have to say, it would have to be. I guess it would have to be the Parti Québécois. Like, I guess it would have to be a change within the party. Actually, I think it would be, or if they had a minority government, then maybe you're right. Then maybe because like we're talking about provincial legislation here, right? Not federal. So, in terms of people like getting a lot in the province of Quebec, yeah, I really don't know. It would have to be a minority government situation or a change from inside the party, I think, because I really don't see them getting ousted anytime soon. If it does happen, I will be very surprised.
Well, hopefully the people power movements can, well, best of luck to, best of luck to them on that. And
Best
then,
of luck to Quebec.
and that leads to, that leads perfectly to this question then, which is, now, given how feminism sometimes has been cynically used to support abysmal and ghastly imperial wars and other crimes against humanity, we see this in the form of, Hillary Clinton, uh, Angela Merkel, Jacinda Ardern, and even Margaret Thatcher, from right-wing politicians, from mainstream to far-right parties, weaponizing feminism to get people to support, ongoing wars in Afghanistan, a potential war in Syria, and even supporting non-existing moderate rebels in Syria and Libya, who, ironically, they were secular governments and women actually had much more rights there compared to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE, who are, allies of the West. And I just wanted, I just wanted your opinion on that. And can you, reflect on that? And because that sort of is an extension of the white liberal feminism and the white savior, white woman's, white man's burden, right?
Mm-hmm. So there's two elements of that. Firstly, a bit of a critique on the framing, because I think that like when we talk about weaponizing feminism, I think we should look at it more as like weaponizing the concept. A lot of the times, I just want to point out that we tend to say that like women in power weaponizing feminism a lot more than we would ever say for like a man, despite the fact that when Canada
Oh,
was going into
men use it
Afghanistan,
too.
we had a man in charge who was using the idea that like women's inequity in Afghanistan was a problem, and I was taught that in school. I was taught about Malala Yousafzai, love her, stan her, but like she was used as a prop to say like, hey, it's really bad, which yes, obviously Taliban shooting her very bad, but like then therefore we should be there was kind of the idea. And so like that's really the question, like that's really important to distinguish, like if we're talking about like women, because like when we talk about like women in power, the thing is like I'm not going to automatically put feminism onto them. So unless they're going to like explicitly say that that's a reasoning for why doing something, I'm not going to like assume that. And a lot of times they'll just say it like at the end, like, oh, and also for women's equity, because like, let's be real, if you're a politician woman, you should just be appealing to the fact that women's equity all the time, right? Because like from a strategy standpoint, you want your supporters are probably happy you're a woman, so play up the fact that like you're a woman, right? It makes sense. It's the same thing with like Barack Obama was like, hell yeah, making history. It's the same thing, right? Where it's like you're going to want to play up the history that you are in the making because it's good strategy. But in terms of like actually like weaponizing it and things like that, I really do look at it as kind of like a necessary thing that just kind of happens. I don't think it's great. I don't
What do you
love
mean?
it, but I think that
What do you mean? You see as a necessary thing?
I think that it's fundamentally something that we're going to do. Like if we have systems of I think we're going to do it, because like if we have systems of pushback against oppressions, right? There's going to be more reductive takes. There's going to be takes that don't make a lot of sense. There's going to be takes that exclude certain other perspectives. There's going to be takes that say, well, I'm just going to look at the fact that Barack Obama is making history right now, and I'm not going to look at him as a candidate. I'm just going to look at the fact that we are pushing against this thing that is obviously bad, and I'm not going to look at everything, all of the consequences of that. So like that's something that we see like a lot, right? And I think that like that's just simply because we are reductive as humans. We reduce things. We can associate, if we can associate something with something that we think should be happening, then we're just like, oh yeah, sounds good, I don't need to worry about this, that sounds good. And that's something that is necessarily going to happen. And I think no matter how much we adapt and add to our complexity of understanding, we're going to run into these problems. You see the same problems in the queer community as well, right? This idea that like white men twinks are able to be accepted and get a good job and all of this, but then we have like non-binary people of lower social status who can't get a job, or they're just not going to be fired, or they're going to be misgendered constantly at their job, and like they have to go through that every single day. So I think that like I think that it's something that just happens. I don't think there's a way of avoiding it, frankly. And I think that if I was going to spend all of my time and energy getting that they're using my values to do something bad, I think I would just waste so much time, and I would much rather focus on where people are using the values to do good things, because I think that that's what we need to amplify, because as soon as that becomes the more status quo or the more normalized or the more talked about, suddenly that's the more reductive opinion. That's the opinion that's simpler for people to understand, or the lens through which people are able to understand things more simply. So yeah, I just think that like this sort of reductive weaponization, opportunism, etc., 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 yeah, that's gonna happen. I just kind of accepted it. Maybe that's a little bit doomer, but I have accepted it.
But shouldn't we not accept it? Because to use something as noble as feminism and to weaponize it to say we're going to target, we're going to put sanctions on Iran, or we're going to go into Afghanistan and invade them and kill a bunch of people, and that I don't see what's very feminist about that, since it's women and children who are always on the crossfire when it comes to warfare, and should we be pushing should we be pushing back against against that, especially when when these politicians, female or female or male, center right party or far right party or center left party or or whatever party, are using the images of poor defenseless women and children, and we need to be the ones to save them, when we know under imperialism that's they're cynically using, again, they're cynically using feminism, and they're cynically using half-truths to just full-on fake news to get people to support an immoral war.
Yeah, so I think that there needs to be a distinction between when people are functionally doing it versus when they're cynically doing it, because I think that was a really good point that you just made. When there's that cynicism there, this is a big part of reporters' jobs, right? To say to a politician, hey, you've said this, but you're doing this. Please explain this to the public. That's like the most basic part of our jobs, right? And so like that is something that like definitely needs to be done. But I've also learned that like when people are cynically doing that, they have a response. They're ready to go for it. So then you're stuck into this whole debate and you're just like, oh my gosh, what am I even doing here? And like, not that that's a complete waste of time or something like that, but it's just simply not a priority for me, because like I say, it's a very basic part of, I'm probably going to do it many times in my life, and I appreciate all the other people that do it, but it's just very much like a basic catch that doesn't always work. Like it's like a filter, right? Like a really wide filter. Like sometimes it'll catch it, but like sometimes it won't, because they were smart and they chopped up their callous usage, I guess you could say, of feminism into little tiny bits, and it gets through the cracks, and that's just how it goes. But when we talk about functional, when we talk about this being functional, there doesn't necessarily have to be that intent there. And I think that like when I was like 6 years old, and just back to that personal example of learning about the Taliban in school, when I got this information, I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, we have to go. What the heck? And it wasn't because and like I was a child, right? But like it was very specifically because I was under the impression that they would be going to help. And so if you have this understanding that you're going to help, and you don't have an understanding of any of the consequences of that, you run into some problems, right? And so just this idea of, oh yeah, we're going to help, totally makes sense if you're not actually looking into what does that help look like. And I don't think that I'm the only one that felt that way. And in fact, I think that all of the soldiers that went there probably felt that way 100%. Like, hey, there might have to be some bad stuff here, but I'm here to go do a good thing. I'm here to do my job. I'm here to serve a purpose. I'm here to try and improve this. And so those people really need to be recognized for what they are. People that maybe don't have the whole story. People that need more information, because their take the status quo is probably a little reductive, but that's just because they're just trying to get by and do the best they can. So I really like when we detach intent from things, because I think it's more helpful, because then like I'm at the point where I'm able to, like, for example, like talk, frankly, with somebody who is in support of the war, into the invasion of Afghanistan, and I'm able to talk to them about, well, what worked in your eyes, what didn't work in your eyes, and then I'm able to hit them hard on the things that didn't work and say, well, this could be avoided if we took consideration of these things, X, Y, Z, all of the collateral damage, all of the destabilization, et cetera, and then like we can look at the comparative. Well, what destabilization would have happened anyway if no action was taken, right? So those are all things that you need to be able to compare and engage with people in the specifics. If you want to be able to do, if you want to be able to like engage with people constructively in the future or change it for the future, those people that are like functionally doing it, but not necessarily callously weaponizing feminism, you need to meet them where they're at and like give them as much good faith and charitability as you can for you to have any constructive and specific conversations moving forward.
Well, Canada has it. Well, I mean, just talking about Canada alone, Canada has a very wonderful propaganda system that's in which I don't fault that many people do think that that the war in Afghanistan was a moral crusade for feminism, or that Libya was a that Libya was a good war, or that even the current Western Gulf War on Syria. I mean, people are propagated. People are propagated constantly, either coming from NGOs or coming from medias, or coming from their communities, if many people work in the arms industry as well. But that being said, I mean, war, I mean, there's nothing feminism about war, and the fact that the United States supported the Taliban all of those years, including Canada supported the Taliban for all those years, and now they're waging a war in which the people that they were helping with were rival sexist and were rival Islamists, and of course in Syria, the West supported the West basically supported ISIS and allowed Saudi Arabia and Qatar to export these sexists into Syria, which was a secular government, and that's why I was asking you. Shouldn't we? That's why I was basically asking, like, shouldn't we be decrying the Hillary Clintons of the world, the Angela Merkels of the world, the Thatchers of the world, and their male counterparts, when they use feminism like that to support these corrupt imperial wars?
Yeah, I mean, you can. If that's how you want to spend your time, that's fine, but I won't be spending my time doing it, because I don't know if this makes me an optimist or a crazy optimist or a crazy pessimist, probably one of the two. But I just assume leaders are going to maliciously use whatever they can. I just assume that. That's my assumption. And I don't just mean leaders that are particularly draconian, I mean leaders, period. I assume that if there is a leader in society, they're going to use what they can use to get their objectives done. So what I need to do is understand what their objectives are, understand where those objectives could be problematic or cause harm, and look at how we can maybe adapt their strategies. Because I don't like, I'm not a leader, right? I'm not going to come out with a whole new like policy plan, but I think that like as a society and as a community, we need to like adapt constructively. So like, and like this, I think that war is actually a really great example to talk about the difference between like adapting constructively versus just like criticizing. Because there's a lot of times there's this idea that like, for example, like when Trump just pulled out of Syria, and there was so many people that were like progressives and stuff that were like, oh, woohoo. I'm like, this was not good. This isn't how you do it. And I think
I would disagree with you on that, but continue with what you're saying.
Okay. Well, it was a disaster by everybody that like was in the region. Like everybody that was in the region that was there gave international reports saying that it was a disaster and people got hurt because it was irresponsible. Whether or not they should have been like, I think the idea of de-escalating and getting out of wars is probably always a universal good, right? Like it's probably always a really good thing. But how you do it has to be in a way that isn't going to just screw up everything more. And that's exactly what happened under the Trump administration. I don't have all my sources for this now. I'm happy to send it to you later, but like a lot of people got hurt because of that, and it wasn't okay. And so when I look at situations like that, it really reminds me, like, we need to have constructive solutions. Like, if we're talking about Syria, for example, that has been such a complex situation with so many different areas of conflict and pressure points and things like that, if we were going to adapt that response and say, okay, we actually do want to get out of Syria, let's go, what should have happened is like a very long-term effort to like collaborate with the people there and say, hey, we wanna get out. What do you need from us to make that happen? What do you need from me to make sure that I can get out safely and give you your country back? That's what needs to happen, not just this, we just go gung-ho, I'm out of here.
I'll just say one thing before I move on to the next. The next question. That the Syria war was a Western Gulf war on a sovereign government and a secular, non-sectarian government, and that just like Iraq and Libya, and just like Iraq and Libya and other wars, it was a pack of lies. And the West were the ones that created the crisis in Syria by funding non-existent moderate rebels like ISIS and so forth. And therefore, West, get the beep out of Syria. The Syrian people don't want you there. And let the Syrians themselves, and I really mean the Syrians themselves, figure out, okay, how do we change our society if we want it to be changed, or how do we, modernize itself? But I think the Syrians can do it without the help of the West, which always claims they know best, or the fact that the West does not know best. In fact, the West basically exported ISIS there and is trying to now they're trying to balkanize the country.
Yeah, the West made so many mistakes in the Middle East and in all of those conflicts that we have today. Like, at the end of the day, like, you can tie a fault line to the West in some sort of way, right? Not that there aren't people there that are at fault as well for a lot of, like, not just the horrible things that have happened, but like the deeply entrenched multi-generational struggles as well. But like I say, like, it's very important that we don't just say, okay, that never should have happened, therefore we just dip. Like, that can't be a solution. We have to have something more constructive than that, because it's kind of like,
Well,
actually, in universe.
Well, the West owes Syria compensation. That is for sure. The West owes Syria compensation, and they should not be doing it by still supporting rebels who want to destroy the country, and of course the monstrous sanctions which are now in place in Syria. And if there are people fleeing the country for whatever reason, they're either fleeing it because of Assad or they're fleeing it because of ISIS, then we should be welcoming those refugees. But
Oh yeah, we love advocating for the refugee rights. Yeah.
All right, on to the next question then, which is has Western feminism actually no, actually we already covered that one. That was about the Muslim ban and stuff like that. So on to this question, which is, can you talk about how in music we have so many female vocalists in pop, R&B, jazz, EDM, electronic dance music, and sadly enough, there's not that many female artists in rock, metal, and rap. And I want your thoughts on that. And do you think that there's an over-sexualization of the female body in pop music? And go ahead and answer that.
I'll just start with the over-sexualization question because that's probably the most simple one.
Sure.
Yes, there is over-sexualization. That doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. Especially as we are seeing people reclaiming their sexuality and getting bank for it. Look at Cardi B, right? Like, there is a woman that was a stripper, and now she has a lot of money and a lot of political, cultural, and economic capital, right? So I think that, like, I'm not saying that it's always a bad thing, but definitely, yeah, over-sexualization is another part of the commodified music industry, 100%. Descriptively, absolutely true. Now, in terms of an absence of women in certain genres, I don't know how true that is because I haven't looked into like specifically like this saturation. I will say that like my music tastes are kind of weird and kind of very particular. So I have a
Well, I
lot
think
of
there's no such thing as weird taste in music. I think, hey, whatever is your type of music, whatever, fine.
so there's this one female rapper that I do want to mention by name. I won't go into specifics other than this, but like Rocky Rivera. I think she's an American artist. I believe she's either Indigenous or Latino. But she is absolutely amazing, Rocky Rivera, in terms of the music she publishes describing her experience as a woman. I adore her pieces where she talks about it. She has pieces about being a mom. She got her song Brown Babies is her song about her love of being a mother of her brown children who she loves, right? And this is the type of joy in one's identity that really gets me going personally. Like when I see some sort of expression or love of one's self-identity in art, I have such a good time with that. Maybe it is because I am a story snatcher by trade and by existence. Maybe that's just who I am. But I just love hearing people's stories and love for their place within their story. So she's one of those rappers that I just so much respect for. But in terms of why they aren't necessarily the same prevalence, I would have to think that it just comes down to the idea that female artists are a genre in and of themselves. There's kind of that idea, and I'm not a music expert, so I don't know if this is something that is like technically correct, but there's this idea that like if you're talking about anything that's alt, so you're talking about rock, like an amazing female vocalist in rock is like it's like a moment, it's like a sensationalist thing. It's like, oh my god, do you listen to her roar? Like these metal rock female rock singers that can growl like it's nothing. People will share that video around and be like, oh my god, do you hear her roar? But then like at the end of the day, her music isn't getting the same traction. So I really don't know what that is, except maybe the idea that like it is a specialized experience for like a specialized moment. And I think that might come out a bit in music, music even like Rocky Rivera's as well, because like she's talking a lot about like her personal experience as a working woman. That's like a big thing for her. And I just don't know that most audiences that listen or that love rap would want to hear that, right? Because like when we think of a lot of like when we think of a lot of rap artists, it's so discursive, right? There's so many different rap artists, but when we think about like big rap artists today, it's something that you can work out at the gym too, is a lot of times kind of the vibe that gets very popular in pop anyway. And so I'm specifically talking about mainstream because obviously rap culture is a whole ocean of experiences. But yeah, so the only thing I can think of is that it's like relegated as like a different experience for like when you're in a specific mood, but I'm really not sure like why that is to this day, because so much of the time women have dominated in pop entertainment, as you point out, and specifically white women have dominated in pop entertainment. And when women of color are able to dominate, they honestly get iconic status a lot of the time, because we're talking about people like Beyonce and stuff like that, because it's like this is like such a whole new experience because we haven't seen this before. Not that there haven't been black artists before Beyonce, but that's the idea coming from like the mainstream audiences, right? Or we haven't seen this since 20 years ago when there was another female black artist that was so amazing. Especially because so much of the time like music cultures that we're talking about here, like specifically like rap and rock, like those are the creative babies of black and brown people, right? Like it belongs to them at the end of the day, and it has been appropriated and commodified for a larger audience, right? So it also almost makes me think that like maybe the things that that larger audience is selecting is the things that make them the most comfortable. That could be a reason as well. So there's a lot of reasons that could be. I'm not really sure what to make of it either, but I do know that there's something going on there. And it might have more to do with our perception as audience members rather than actual proximity or even prominence in the actual communities. It might be more us as onlookers and us as like a mainstream audience. And then also when it comes to things like award shows, marketing, blah, 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 obviously certain marginalized communities have been excluded from that in so many different ways. And like white people are continuously given credit for music that Black and brown people have made, or like genres, I guess I should say, not necessarily specific songs. So that also probably is integrated into it in some sense. So yeah, there's a lot going on there with music and entertainment.
Well, but going back to the issue of you know, of the over sexualization in the over sexualization of the female body in pop music. I mean, don't you think that sometimes seeing too much of Cardi B's stripping, and or the fact that Britney Spears, when she wasn't the kind of Disney teen bop and starting to get older and do more music, she was over. I mean, a lot of her music was, or certainly her performances were also being over sexualized, and of course you have this with Miley Cyrus and countless other pop vocalists. Isn't that sort of counterproductive, given that you have so many women who are insecure about their bodies, and there's constantly all those magazines of like, this is the perfect this is the perfect body, and that the over sexualization of of these just sort of contributes to the everyday sexism and the epidemic of sexual assaults, and people putting way too much emphasis on beauty as opposed to the person's character or the person's talents.
Yeah, so I don't really see it as that problematic for those things for a few reasons. One, if we're talking about unrealistic beauty standards and stuff, the biggest cause of that right now is like, especially particularly for women, if we're talking about women, the main cause of that is probably like Instagram, OnlyFans, things like that. Not even OnlyFans. Like that, I don't even know if that would really be it, because that's something that's so specialized. But like any sort of mass production of like online commodification of women's bodies, that's where that's going to come from. And like I don't necessarily think that's always bad either, provided that there is adequate explanation with the messaging to the young women that like, hey, this isn't realistic, this is art, this is Photoshop, this is makeup, this is whatever, right? So as long as people can understand that, they should still, young women understand that they can still love and accept their bodies as they are. I think it's okay, and I think that we are seeing some sort of pushback to that sort of thing that's happening on social media already, the same way we saw this pushback against sexualization of women in the 2000s in pop culture, right? So like I think that like the main problem is for unrealistic beauty standards and stuff is coming from more that level of things. But in terms of like reinforcing the idea that like women are objects, that is a really, really good question. So when we talk about like reinforcing whether or not women are objects, I think that the context of that sexuality is really, really important. So like when we look at like Cardi B's like WAP, like it's such an iconic meme now because it's just been a whole thing, right? But at the end of the day, it comes down to a businesswoman who decided to make a song about WAP. So that's what she did, right? And like it was about her pleasure, and it was about commodifying something that belonged to her. And so if we're talking about Britney Spears, that's a little different. She was young. Her record label was pushing that on her, and she didn't have the same, it wasn't an expression of her like her girlhood, I could even say, because she was a girl at the time, not a woman. She was a girl. Her like budding girlhood sexuality, her little crush on some boy or whatever, it wasn't about that. It was about the idea that she should be the object to be gazed upon. Whereas when we look at like WAP, it's like the woman objectifying herself. So that contextually is very different as well, because I don't think that like objectification is inherently bad. I don't think that commodifying such objectification is inherently bad. I mean, like women gotta do what they gotta do. Like we all gotta work, right? We all gotta make our money. If that's how you're gonna do it, that's how you're gonna do it. And this is why I think it's so important that like feminism isn't exclusionary to sex workers as well. I think that sex workers really need to be included in these conversations, particularly like when we do talk about things like OnlyFans. Like I misspoke earlier and said OnlyFans is contributing to unrealistic beauty standards. Maybe it is a little bit, but I don't really think that was a fair thing to add to that list. I would more put Instagram and Twitter above that. And like I think that like we can tell the difference if an objectification is okay or not, depending on who is doing the objectifying, who is the actor here. And if you're going to be commodifying it, obviously that gets really hard to tell, right? Because it's like, is the actor here your entire audience, or is the actor you? I can't tell, Cardi B. You got to tell me. Fortunately, Cardi B talks a lot, and she's very happy to tell you. But that's not always the situation. So I could understand why people are very hesitant with other circumstances, specifically like when we are talking about young women in the industry as well, right? Like there's these young TikTok stars. There's these young TikTok stars, and I'm not on TikTok. I'm not a TikTok person. I'm a little bit too much of a boomer for this, but there has even been like so much sexualization of these young girls on TikTok that didn't necessarily like ask for it. They just wanted to go on TikTok and do their little dances, right? So like those conversations, but then all of a sudden they're getting money, all of a sudden they're an influencer, all of a sudden the spotlight's on them. Are they really making the decision to objectify themselves when they then post something to their Instagram? I don't know if it's their decision or not. And so when those conversations about autonomy come up and get more complex, like obviously we need to have those, but there is some portion of objectification, certainly in pop music and certainly in rap music and certainly in R&B music and all of those industries, that I think is totally chill, totally fine, awesome, let's do it.
Interesting. And this probably leads, that's a pretty good segue then to this question, which is, do you think rock music and rap music and much of the film and TV industry glorifies violent masculinity and machismo, and whether it's intended or not, sexist double, sexist double standards and or triple sexist standards, if that makes any sense. Double standards.
Yeah, totally makes
standards.
Totally makes sense. Yeah, machismo, definitely a thing. It's one of those things in music where it's like, it's really hard for me to like dislike it though. And maybe I come at this from another perspective because I listened to Eminem growing up. I listened to Eminem and I listened to Marilyn Manson and all of those guys, right? So for me, I've always had this implicit understanding of people's need to just listen to some aggressive stuff. Like just listen to something that just is like complete fantasy. The same reason people watch horror, right? Like this is why we love horror movies. We love feeling scared. We love playing with the taboo in art.
Well, horror movies definitely glorify violence. Hence why people want to go see them, right? I mean, they definitely glorify violence, but
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And like that's something that there's something that needs to be said for the place of glorification of violence in art. Romanticization of violence, I think, can be a lot more tricky because it can be sneaky. Like when we start romanticizing it and seeing it as something that is somehow inherently like beautiful and misunderstood, that's we get into bad places, right? But I think the idea that like in art we can put ourselves into a place, a position, a setting, an emotion that isn't okay to feel sometimes, or that we don't like the way we're feeling something, and on a very small scale, maybe some thought goes into the back of your head when you're super angry and you're just like even if let's make it a really like dull, banal example. Let's say I'm 15, my mom tells me to do something, I get really mad, and I like call her a peach in my head.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm so mad, right? That isn't gonna cause any problems. I go and I listen to an Eminem song where he's cussing out his mom, and I'm like, ooh, you know what I mean? Like, I think that there's something to be said for that sort of catharsis, and it's the same thing I think there's something that can be said for that as well. The same thing with like metal musicians as well. Like, there's this idea that like there needs to be some sort of place to put all of that negative garbage. I get that. At the same time, I do agree with you that there is a ton of machismo, and that machismo that is put in all of our content that we have that young men are seeing can be very problematic if they're not thinking what I was thinking when I listened to that song of Eminem cussing out his mom, which was, ooh, like this isn't good, but it's like, okay, it's art, so it's fine. We're just listening to some angry rap, right? So like if we're glorifying the idea that like machismo and this machismo-ness, and we're glorifying it, and we're not being aware that we're glorifying it in a given context in this art, then that's where sneaky things can happen. Because if you're able to discern like very clearly, like this is like my fantasy land right now, and I'm just doing art, or I'm just listening to art, you're able to separate that from how you should act in real life. But if you're going to be internalizing it, that's really problematic, right? So I think there needs to be a bit of more consideration into how we like message songs and art at people and have those sorts of conversations. But I don't think that's a reasonable ask of people like in the industry and the status quo. Like they're not going to have those critical conversations. So more likely, I'm not opposed to this idea that like, and not just this idea, but this has been like objectively happening in the mainstream anyway, because the money is flowing this way, of softening down that machismo a little bit. Like the Eminem probably wouldn't make a song where he is like literally killing his wife anymore. That probably wouldn't happen. And you know what? Like I'm okay with that. Did I listen to that song? Do I still listen to it sometimes? Yes, I'm sorry, cancel me, it's fine. But like the point being, like I can appreciate that art, but also say, might want to leave that one in the past. Because if you're able to like have aggression shown in more better ways now, which I think you are actually, like I think that like part of this is this idea of building new spaces that haven't been built yet and integrating these ideas of the past with the people we are today. Because I think that like if you're able to get that same anger and those same feelings, but put it into the language that people are able to connect with today, you're also able to do this, right? Like if we look at people like Joyner Lucas, he's even done some songs with Eminem, I think. He's one of those guys that is like not going to say any sort of crazy machismo stuff, or not that I've heard at least, but at the same time, you're going to get that same biting anger. And because they actually have very similar styles in the sense that they're the same biting anger, the same hard-hitting, same dark themes, very dark themes. His song about the devil's work and stuff, talking about all of the good people that he's lost and all the great artists that have passed and things like that. He's able to give like those very serious dark emotions without necessarily relying on the machismo as a crutch. And then there's also these other ideas. I love this idea, and I don't know if it's actually called this or not, but this like positive masculinity that I've been seeing more and more and more in rap music, specifically. Like I think Killer Mike is really good about this. I'm not really sure, so like we could probably fact check it, but I'm pretty sure Killer Mike is really good about this. Like getting away, like he still is a big macho guy. I mean, right? Like he's Killer Mike for Pete's sake. But at the same time, he's able to like take away a lot of those themes of machismo that may have reinforced the ideas of people that are listening that it's okay. Instead, when there are those themes of machismo, it's very obvious that it's like an artistic representation of something. In his song with Bamboo, I actually really love this song. Upset the Setup. It's a song about trying to get rid of gang violence and get rid of the divisions within their community, and stop gang violence and stop the gun violence. And one of the best lines in it is like, maybe next summer nobody's mama gotta cry. And I love that line, because that little line alone frames a very machismo topic into the eyes of just women that were just there, sort of thing. And like it's not even that they're the main actor of this song or something like that. It's just it pops up because he's trying to make sure that like those voices are integrated and that it's not just all this machismo view. And I really like that, actually. Yeah.
Interesting. And in terms of and you know, we're gonna have to have that. I'm gonna have to have that conversation with you. More another day. We're gonna probably have to dedicate a whole show for that. But but moving on to the last two questions that I wanted to ask, which is I wanted your reflections on the Me Too moments. I don't really consider it a movement. I consider it Me Too moments. And do you have any criticisms of the whole Me Too movement by any chance?
Yeah, so I think that like the Me Too movement overall has been pretty good, pretty responsible. I think that the reporting that has been done, now keep in mind I am a reporter, so this is like always the lens that I will immediately go to. Um, from a reporting aspect, I think that they were very, very good at being cautious and credible and all of that. Project Veritas, which is like a thing that exists, it's like a troll media group, new media group, and
Although,
they tried to like trick. Yeah.
I'll give credit where credit's due to Project Veritas. They did debunk that so many people thought that the anti-Russia stuff that they tried to use on Trump was complete BS. But other than that, yeah, it's a very right-wing hit piece, more or less.
Okay, we can talk about the reporting on that they did on Russia later, because from what I understand, it was also completely not very credible, not very good. But we can talk about that later.
But going back to what you were saying about Me Too, though.
Yeah, they are not a very credible group. And they had tried to trick, I believe it was the New York Times, although I could be wrong. I could be remembering it correctly. They tried to like trick one of these major news orgs into just like believing this fake Me Too story to show, oh, it's all BS. All of the news orgs are just like letting whoever make an accusation and then it ruins this man's life, sort of thing. That was the narrative they were trying to string up. Didn't work. Did not work at all, because they were like, yeah, we can't run this story, there's not enough evidence. And that was just a funny anecdote to me, because I think it really shows the idea that like there's like almost three thresholds, like three layers, so like two different, so I guess that would be thresholds. Three thresholds where it's like the first one is like actually being able to get your story published somewhere, because there needs to be a certain standard of evidence for that to happen, right? I guess the first layer would just be like saying something on Twitter, right? People are saying, oh, make an accusation, but then there's actually getting it verified by a journalist, which is like, okay, well, it's probably more credible, but like we don't know, it's what this person is saying, right? And then the last layer, of course, being like the highest standard, being like being able to prove something in court, which A, is something that a lot of women don't want to do, and B, is something that a lot of women can't do. So like when you get into like the lower area where it's just like people saying stuff, I think that that's fine, and also like not problematic. I've heard a lot of people say things like, well, people will just be losing their jobs and serious consequences, but I think like on large we can see that like what it's done more than anything is give people spaces where they feel comfortable talking about stuff without the pressure to prove that what they're saying is true. And I think that's a really nice thing from like a social perspective. And then like when we get to the second threshold with kind of the Me Too moments that you reference, where it's like these big moments where there's these big controversies about a specific instance or thing.
Yeah.
I think that like overall, like I said, like I think that the journalism so far has been fairly good. I haven't seen any major indication that journalists haven't been able to accommodate the Me Too movement, in the sense that like haven't been able to like weed out false allegations. Not that every false allegation can be weeded out, but that they're not publishing things that like they can't verify, which I think is like really good. So that's just chugging along the way it's supposed to. And I think that like when we look at that third threshold though is where we get into a little bit of a problem, because so much of the time this legal standard is so high, and it's supposed to be, right? It's like literally supposed to be. It's that way by design, because they can't, but because that's seen as the reason, like that's seen as the only way to validate a woman's truth a lot of the time, that has become like super problematic, right? And then like, so when you murk up all the waters with these three different thresholds, I think a lot of times people conflate those things, and they say, oh, this random accusation is the same as this pending court case, is the same as this thing that was published with this mainstream news organization that vetted everything. So I think that that's problematic, to the fact that we've called all of those things the same thing, quite frankly, because I do think that conflation isn't good, because we're talking about three completely different experiences here, right? But other than that, my critiques are far and few in between.
I probably disagree with you slightly on some of the issues when it comes to Me Too. I think in general, if there's an investigation, that some executive has been a serial abuser, okay, so this is, let's not be around the bush. The Harvey Weinstein thing, for example, I think it's fair to say, from judging from the two documentaries or three documentaries I saw about the Weinstein scandal, that was more or less pretty credible journalism. And I think, and I think, yeah, I think there is no doubt that, that the guy was guilty of the crimes that he was, accused of. My issue, though, with Me Too in general is I don't know. I think as important as it is to apparently expose somebody as being an abuser, there's also this thing called innocence until proven guilty. And I find when a lot of the Me Too moments have been, somebody who just goes on Twitter and says, this actor, molested me, or that actor, raped me, and then it becomes just this whole social media vigilantism, as opposed to just, hey, if if the person's accused of a crime, you go to the police, you bring the person to court, and you let a jury, decide whether the person's guilty or not. And I just find that too much of Me Too has just been this social media vigilantism, where, yeah, as opposed to the whole, in the sense.
So I think we actually identified. Well, actually, I identify the very problem that you have. I think because when you're saying, well, there's a thing called innocence until proven guilty. Yes, you're correct for a legal thing, but when we talk about like social interactions, there's going to be social pushback if there is believed that you have done some sort of indiscretion, whether that even be like, let's make it a non-sexual thing. Let's say that like let's talk about Julie Payette instead, right? She harassed her. Our former governor general had to resign because she was bullying, harassing, and somewhat abusive of her staff. There was nothing sexual about it, right? Yeah. But she ended up resigning, and she ended up getting blasted for it on social media and everything else. And I feel like that's something that we should probably look to make very similar, right? So if there's some sort of like Twitter level threshold type accusation that doesn't necessarily seem to hold any weight, then we should probably look at it similarly, where it's like, okay, this person might have done a faux pas. Like at the beginning of the Julie Payette story, before everything was confirmed, right? We were just hearing whispers that she was a really mean boss, basically. Okay, there's probably a problem there. We should look into it. Julie Payette, make sure you're nice, please. And like a similar sort of social response should happen at that level, right? What you're talking about is like this like mob mentality stuff that comes with the internet. I don't think we can stop that. Quite frankly, I don't. This is another one of those moments where I just.
It's awful.
I know it's awful. I know it is, but I don't think that that's a problem with Me Too. I think that's a problem with the internet. And like I said, this is another one of those problems where I'm putting my hands up and saying I can't. I'm accepting it. I have to accept it because otherwise I'm not going to survive in this world, right? Like, I have to accept. I have to accept that internet mobs are part of the world.
Wait a minute. We cannot accept that. We have to have innocence until proven guilty. I mean,
in the law, yes, absolutely.
If somebody tomorrow says Morgana molested me, Morgana raped me, and there's no evidence to back that up, and it's just and people just pile on you, troll you, and
well, I didn't say it was a good thing. I didn't say it was a good thing, just that it's a reality right now. That's functionally what's going to be happening. What should happen is what I outlined before, where it's like a similar inquiry as to when we first got whispers of Julie Payette being rude to her employees, being like, okay, well, we'll check in with your employees, make sure they have the supports they need. Also, Julie Payette, we've been hearing whispers about this, just please clean your act up if there's been any problems. Like something along those lines would make sense for like that level of things where there's no evidence. But then let's say we go further along in the story and there is evidence that is being gotten to the same extent that Julie Payette had evidence against her in that journalistic reporting. Now we're at the second threshold, and in that case I do feel like there is some merit to having public pressure going on to a person, depending on the person. Obviously there's a lot to think about there, right? And because I don't feel comfortable with just because I don't feel comfortable with making that decision, or I don't feel comfortable with mobs making that decision, it doesn't really matter. Somebody's going to, right? Because there is going to be some sort of public pushback. We live in a, especially when we're talking about private market interactions, we're talking about the free market, right? We're talking about jobs. We're not talking about elected officials a lot of the time with Me Too, right? So we're talking about a situation that is inherently
regulated more. There have been politicians in the cross.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, Al Franken. I
Absolutely,
mean, Al
hard
Franken. I
fact.
mean, if you take the case of Al Franken, for example, like that guy. I mean, that guy was not being a serial abuser, and I mean, the fact that he got fired, for photobombing some, you know, some, some GI soldier. I thought that was ridiculous, and I didn't see how that was even on the level of, say, a Harvey Weinstein, for example, and uh, Kevin Spacey and him being chased out of a job and stuff like that. Okay, if the guy is accused of of a crime, okay, bring him to court. But does it have to be? But the whole social media vigilante aspect of it, I mean, that's almost like when people were just accused of such and such a crime, and then they would just be lynched without
Well, okay, no, I need to push back against this. What would you have them do, the victims? The victims that know they don't have a court case, they know they don't even can't afford a lawyer, know they don't have a court case. What do? They just, because the state is going to step in for criminal things, right? So if there's a bodily assault, there's two aspects of it in Canada. There's the criminal assault, which the state will step into, and that requires you go and report your thing, but the state decides. You don't get to decide if there's actually a trial or not. As the victim, you have no say. The lawyer doesn't belong to you. The lawyer belongs to the state, okay? And if you want to have a private suit, so this would be a civil suit, and this is not innocent until proven guilty. That is not the threshold for civil suits. If you wanted to take somebody to a tort law and you wanted to get on the balance of probabilities, some sort of reparations for the harm that was done against you, that's a losing game if you're a woman with little capital. Or if the person that harmed you went bankrupt since then that's a losing game too, because all you're going to be able to get from them is damages if you can prove on the balance of probabilities that this assault actually did happen, which may not even be the case, depending on the fact that evidence is sometimes really hard to come by, especially years later. So my question is, what would you have them do?
That is that's something I've never really thought of, but and that's something I probably definitely need to reflect on that. And you are right. There is the epidemic of sexual assaults. I mean, in the U.S., for example, there's the epidemic of sexual assaults in the military and sexual assaults on
In
college.
Canada, military as well. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. And so. And in that respect, yeah, I complete. In that respect,
It's the last recourse people have. If you're not able to take somebody to court for a civil suit because you don't think that you're going to be able to prove that this assault happened on the balance of probabilities, or more likely you just don't have the money, or it's just not worth it because he's not going to be able to give you enough money to compensate for your harm.
That probably goes
and
back.
The state isn't prosecuting. It's kind of like this idea that we need to put these legal standards onto this social movement, when it's very clear that this social movement is a supplement for the fact that the legal system can't work to accommodate all of these things. We need to figure these things out for ourselves. We need to step up and think critically and hold each other accountable. Yeah.
But if the person was completely innocent of all charges that the person and their social media vigilantes did, but but then what? I mean that is why we do have the concept of innocence until proven guilty, as opposed to persons already guilty and it's going to be metaphorically lynched or burned at the stake.
So what are the actual what are the consequences that we are okay with a false I think that this needs to be looked at through another threshold lens. Okay, so what are the consequences that Morgana is okay with for an innocent man accused of something, but he was innocent? Okay, let's just say it's completely wrong. We were wrong, but what am I okay with? The threshold that I'm okay with is a few Twitter posts. That's where I'm okay with it. When we talk about anything that goes beyond that, whether it be harassment, doxing, etc., 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 all of that's not okay. So those should all be social rules that are enforced, right? We all need to hold each other accountable in that sense as well. Where we can't be allowing people to be bullying, harassing, and doxing people because of allegations that have not been verified, right? That's another behavior that we need to curb independently, because but am I okay with a few Twitter posts and a few, like, a false accusation causing some social discomfort? Yeah, I am. I'm okay. I will bite that harm. I will bite that harm because I think I have to. Because otherwise, what's the alternative, right? These women staying silent? That is what the alternative is. Because, so yeah, I'm okay with them having a few
Yeah,
Twitter posts where there's some false accusations. I have to bite that harm because otherwise I would just be lying to you, Youri. I would be lying to you, right? Like if I said to you, I'm not okay with any false accusations, and then
oh,
you would look at me and say,
we shouldn't tolerate false accusations. Period. Now,
well, because when I say I'm okay with it, I'm saying, I mean, I would rather have a few false accusations than completely stifle the MeToo movement altogether. I'm saying if we're having a comparative where MeToo movement exists versus doesn't exist, I'm okay with a certain amount of false accusations. Yes, for it to exist. It is a very small amount of accusations, and it is also a situation where the accusations harm on their lives would have to be very small as well. Like I say, we need to police our own behavior as well when it comes to like things like doxing, harassment, bullying, calling people's employers and things like that. Like all of those things are obviously things that we need to socially police as well. But like, I think I have to like just accept that there is going to be some BS that gets out into the world. I'm not going to report on it, but it's going to be out there.
I'm going to politely agree to disagree with you on on that one, but
so what's your alternative? This is what I'm trying to get at. Like, what's your alternative?
My alternative, I don't know. I think my alternative is that well, you brought up
because we can't tell from the outside if they're false or not.
Well, you brought up. Well,
we can't tell from the outside. Oh, sorry.
Well, no, like you brought up the other, you brought up the cases of, of how some women, not aren't wealthy enough to put said accuser, hypothetical accuser, to court, and now a lot of times, there's all those three-tiered systems and so forth. So, okay, in that respect, the best I can come up with is I don't know. I don't know what would be the alternative. I'm just, but if we're just talking about somebody who accuses somebody, I just cannot get on board with with somebody who just goes hypothetically Jack right there raped me, and then all of a sudden millions of people on Twitter are calling for the person to be hanged before there's even been an actual proper investigation and and so forth. But
plenty of women that have experienced sexual violence, particularly those in the sex work industry or those that have been victims of revenge porn as well, have had those things happen to them because of something that happened to them. So like we have to put it in that context as well, right? Like harassment online is something that women have been dealing with for a long time. So like I totally agree with you that I'm not okay with it, and I can't get behind the person obviously that is making the false accusation, but like I have to be okay with some of these harms. Otherwise it's like I say, like the alternative is just like saying, oh, take them to court. And I can't do that. You know what I mean? Like I can't tell a woman just take them to court.
We have to accept collateral damage and all of that. I don't get it, but anywho. Okay, well, but yeah, we'll
revisit that another day. I feel like we could talk about that more.
Exactly. We'll agree and disagree on that, but you have given me lots of stuff to think of, and I'll actually have to go into that. And the last question I wanted to ask you, and this actually goes back to something that that you touched about in the beginning of our conversation, which is anything else that you'd like to discuss about Canadian First Nation Inuit Métis feminism and matriarchy, and talk about how and what distinguishes that from Western Euro North American feminism, which sometimes is multiracial, sometimes it's a melting pot of different feminism. And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I don't know if I'd say like there's like one specific school of Indigenous feminist thought that I'm thinking of right now, but I will say that like Indigenous feminists, like in the practical sense, are leading the way on so many different things. And we see this on a daily basis. One of my favorite examples, most recently, I got to speak with the founder of Sick Muse Arts in Toronto, which is essentially an organization, and she's a refugee Indigenous woman from Chile. And it's the idea of like, yeah, providing artwork and community projects and things like that to refugees and empowerment of refugees in the Toronto area. They also have this beautiful, beautiful project on like 1,000 Colors of Peace, and it was in Chile. They had everyone paint like a little thing of what peace means to them. And the idea was there was some like very testy stuff happening in the national government at the time. Everyone's really polarized, some conflicts are happening. But the idea is that like we can still say we are united as Chileans or as people that live here, right? We're united in our love for one another and in our wills for peace with one another. And she is just absolutely fantastic. And this is something I wanted to mention as well. So I'll mention this very important thing that she talked to about me with me. And I've read up a little bit more on this before since then, and it's really a helpful concept, especially when talking about refugees. The idea of like the objectification of refugees. This is such a big thing. Like there's this idea that like you're either the harmer or the helper of the refugees, but either way, it's about you. It's not about the refugee. They're not the actor. It's about people. You're either can identify yourself as somebody that is helping refugees or somebody that doesn't want refugees. And like, right?
Can you explain that again? You mean the people helping out the refugees?
Yes, and so it objectifies the refugee
that they tend to. Well, yeah. Go ahead. Further explain.
Yeah, so there's this, this is most obviously comes out when we talk about helpers, right? Especially when we talk about like Canada, for example, because we're like, oh, we let in all those Syrian refugees, therefore we are good to refugees idea. But the problem with that is that it completely renders the refugee as an object. And when Pamela was talking to me about this, she was explaining that like, they just want me to sit down and shut up and not act like there's anything wrong, but I'm not going to do that. Because that's not me. And she is like honestly such an iconic person. And she talked about the fact that like, hey, that's
Pamela Palmater, you mean?
No, this is a different person.
Okay,
this is a woman from Chile.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I thought I heard. Okay. Anyways, continue.
Yeah. No, I haven't had the fortune of speaking with her yet, actually, but I would love to one day. And so when we're talking about like refugees as an object that can be helped or harmed, a big problem with that is that they are expected to be silent. They are expected to not push back or act or change things in some sort of way. When of course that is what refugees do. They are people that are here to like build and live their lives and exist, right? And live. They're not here to be an object for us to put up on a pedestal and say, oh, look how good we are, because they're here. They should just be grateful. And at the same time, there's all these expectations put onto refugees that like they need to be able to get it together right away and contribute. And when she was speaking to me about all these things, it really clarified a lot for me about the power of Indigenous women to push back against these sets of knowledge that have been entrenched with their own set of knowledge. Because as an Indigenous woman from Chile and Toronto, she's giving me this like very informative perspective, right? That I can use so much moving forward. And she's also a refugee herself as well. So she's speaking from lived experience there. And when we look at just situations like that, that's when I think, oh my gosh, this is why Indigenous women are leading the way right now. This is why they are doing so much. We see with what happened in the Wet'suwet'en, with what happened in Wet'suwet'en, we see tons of land defenders there, matriarchs there, that again are leading the way and pushing back and saying like, hey, this is my way of understanding, this is my way of living, and I'm gonna unapologetically do it, because this is how we can move forward. And there's so much as well when it comes to like environmentalism, et cetera, to insert another further critique of white feminism. I think a lot of the times when like white feminists want to start integrating decolonization into their set of knowledge, there's this idea that like you can just do it. and then it's done. But like, that's not really how it works. You can't just say, I'm going to let Indigenous women lead the way and then throw your hands up. That looks like work. That looks like when you say, I'm going to let Indigenous women lead the way, that means empowering Indigenous women in your community and supporting them and saying like, hey, I'm going to meet you where you're at. What do you need from me? Or also asking, like taking the time to like ask questions of not just about like, what do you need from me, but also like, what's your perspective? How are you coming at this from? That's like the most important thing, because a lot of times like again, white feminism critique here, there's sometimes we think that like we can just solve complicated problems with simple solutions, but that's just really not the case. And it's especially so not the case when you're talking to feminine people that are coming from a perspective that is totally different than your femininity, whatever that may be, right? And so that's why I think it's so important to have like women of all sorts integrating their knowledge with one another. And that's where this sort of transnational feminism comes into play, because then if you're a woman that's been from a refugee camp, this is one story I read about, you move to Canada, you get to Canada, and you're able to help the women that were in those refugee camps right now with their little shops where they sell bags so that they don't have to go to prostitution, as this woman put it in her testimony. Then like you're able to like have this integrated knowledge that is going to be much more robust, and you're also going to get broad strides on many things like environmentalism, like the land back movement, like all of these other things that like Indigenous women just have been leading the way on, and like no one asked them, they just did it on so many different levels. And that's where I think the importance of white feminism comes in, because I do think white feminism is very important. It's very important that white feminism is self-aware of its limitations, and that it says, hey, I'm coming from this perspective, I need to understand this perspective to get on board with you, because I see that you're moving towards a more constructive future, or you're moving towards these things that look really good for how we can relate to one another and understand one another. Or even things as simple as like, you have this really cool environmentalist initiative, I'm going to come help out on Saturday. Things like that. That's really where this community of like women and our strength is able to thrive the most, when there are women of complete difference that are able to like work with one another and see where the other women are being overwritten, because that's such a thing with feminism, right? And that's such a thing with the experience of being a woman, is having your voice or your perspective or your prescription overwritten by somebody else's. So when we're able to say, as women of differing privilege and differing contexts, hey, we need to like listen to this person because they have a really good idea, and not, like I say, not just listen to them, not just follow their lead, but help and do the work and say, I'm going to be with you on this, I want to completely understand this and integrate it into my knowledge. You're just able to do so much more. So yeah, I'm incredibly grateful for not just the Indigenous, but all of the people, all of the matriarchs, all of the females, and all of the gender minorities, frankly, just that have been able to say, we're going to work together and get this job done. That's why I'm so happy about the decolonization kick that people are on right now. Actually, I'm hoping it stays in fashion for a little bit, because I can get away with saying more about it in that case. Because I do think that decolonization knowledge needs to be integrated into everything we do. And I'm just so happy to see the way that like Indigenous women, like not just in Canada, but like I said, in Chile, from everywhere, all over the world, the Indigenous women in Xinjiang, China, the Indigenous women everywhere. I want to see them be empowered and get recognition, not just be empowered, because that almost renders them the object as well, but I want to see them getting recognition for their self-empowerment and the work that they've done to fight for their empowerment and for the empowerment of other women as well. I want to see that.
Well, on that wonderful optimistic notes, and I always love it when somebody is celebrating and championing the rights of Indigenous peoples, and particularly Indigenous women. So thank you for that. So on that note, Morgana, there's so much more I wanted to actually follow up with you on, but we're gonna have to save that for another time. But I really enjoyed our conversation. I hope to have you back on to not only discuss some topics that we actually didn't get the chance to get into, but hopefully also in the future we can I can try to organize a debate on the situation in Jihan and China. But on that note, we are joined on this edition of 1+1 in a special edition all about feminism as well as other topics with Morgana Adby. I'm butchering your name, aren't I?
You did it good this time. I'm so happy.
Awesome.
Thank you. You did
it. All right, just make sure that I did it right. We were joined on this edition of 1+1 with Morgana Adby. And Morgana, thank you so much for joining me today. It was a real honor, and hope to have you back on again soon.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Likewise.